is, man. We ain't about to panic. Ain't no need to be nervous. It's a fight. It's a 7-point ball game, and we get the ball first. It's a fight. Go out there and fight.
Gives it to Love, running left, tripped up, stays on his feet through one tackle, muscling and struggling.
Whoa, he scored!
Oh, he's in!
Oh my gosh!
Touchdown, Notre Dame! Jeremiah Love would not be denied! Aller throws, loose ball, intercepted! Christian Gray picks it off, Notre Dame will get the ball back.
Irish Nation, Notre Dame keeps the win streak going, 7 in a row for Marcus Freeman as Notre Dame dismantles the midshipmen. Looks like the federal government shutdown has extended to the service academies. I'm done with my terrible jokes for the day, but Notre Dame, a resounding 49-10 victory. Mike, this one feels like the most straightforward recap we've ever done. I have zero meaningful thoughts on this game. So we're going to do a quick recap, couple other topics, coaching carousel news that we wanted to cover here that's built up over a few weeks. And I think at this point, we're in a weekly look at what is the college football playoff landscape. What should Notre Dame fans be cheering for? What's our path? We are locked into the conversation here after the first rankings came out last week. So let's dive right into Navy. Walk us through your thoughts on this one and what you thought of the game overall.
You said it. Pretty much any way you slice it, it's very straightforward. This was an extremely dominant game for Notre Dame. Coming into this, the spread was, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, I think we were favored by 24 points or something like that. But then it jumped. So Navy's quarterback, Horvath, we found out, I don't know, a few hours before the game that he was not going to be able to play in the game. And then the line actually jumped to 30, which is a massive, massive line and one that Notre Dame actually cleared fairly easily. So you look at the score, 49-10, you look at total yardage, Notre Dame had over 500 yards, more than double what Navy had. You look at the advanced stats, I'm not going to say most importantly, but from the standpoint of our podcast, maybe honestly that is the most important aspect, but you look at any of the key advanced stats and it was just total annihilation. 100% post-game win expectancy. You look at Havoc, we were talking about coming into this game, that one of the key attributes, one of the key advantages of the triple option that Navy runs is that it really, really limits Havoc. And we were able to get a 22% Havoc rate against Navy. Look, it's not 30%, but 22%. That's a really good Havoc rate against anyone, honestly, and particularly against the service academy. And then on the other side, we allowed basically no Havoc. Navy was not able to disrupt us at all. They were not able to, cause disruptive plays to trip up our offense. Moving to success rate, perhaps the most important measure, the most important advanced stat. There was also a massive gap here. So we had a 54% success rate, incredible. A 55% success rate. If that were sustained over the course of a season, you'd be one of the top offenses of all time. Just to put that into context. Whereas Navy, which coming into
this game, by the way, that's an 89th percentile success rate according to Game on Paper. So we were, top 11% of any game played over the course of a season.
Exactly, stellar number. And then, like I said, you combine that with the very limited Havoc that we allowed. And then, if you look at Navy coming into this game, their offense, which is legitimately a very good offense, and you have to qualify that their quarterback was out for this game, so they were going with a backup. But even with that, we held this Navy offense, which was one of the better offenses in the country, generating a higher success rate. We held them to a 32% success rate. Stellar. That's just basically, you combine the Havoc and you combine that low success rate, and basically it's nearly impossible to generate any sort of meaningful drive and put points on the board. And then moving to the last key metric, which is explosiveness. Notre Dame's offense generated a very high amount of explosiveness. I mean, we could just go down a list of the big plays, and Navy really didn't have much. They had that the one that comes to mind is they had that one run for, I think it was 49 yards, but that was pretty much it. They had some smaller chunk plays here and there, but by and large, we were able to limit their ability to generate explosive plays on offense. So look, any way you want to slice it, the advanced stats said that this was a thorough dismantling by Notre Dame. If you look at the latest SP Plus rankings, we moved up a spot. I believe we're number 6 right now. Perhaps most significantly is our defense continues to trend up and up and up. I don't have the rankings in front of me, but I think we were somewhere around 13 on defense. And at the beginning of the year, after a couple weeks,
I've got
where
it right
defense
here. 12,
12.
is the latest spot that I'm seeing. Yeah, 12 on defense.
And we were around 50. I would say I think it was after the second or third week. So this trend that Brett and I have been talking about week in, week out is that our defense is really moving in the right direction. We're starting to see that increasingly in the advanced data. And we still, again, I mentioned this last week, we had key guys missing this game. We had Christian Gray, he didn't play. Donovan Heinisch, I think he was out this game. And then at Rubio, I think Rubio was also out this game too. So
and Rubio were both out. Felt precautionary against the triple option, kind of a more injury prone, cut blocks, hard on D tackles, but both held out. Fingers crossed for Pittsburgh.
Exactly. So look, hopefully we get these guys back. I'm with you, Brett. I think it's probably precautionary. My optimistic expectation is, and this is not based on any sort of insider knowledge about the program, but my optimistic hope is that we're able to get all these guys back, or hopefully at least two. It seems like they're not serious injuries, is the impression that I've gotten. So we'll see. But look, we're number 12 right now. I think realistically, we're playing certainly at the level of a top 10 defense right now. You could maybe even argue top 5. So we'll see. It's the Chris Ash defense is it's looking how we hoped it would look coming into the season. Just took a little bit to get there, but it's really coming into form.
Yeah, we always like starting glass half full, which side of the ball played better. Honestly, coin flip in this one. But once again, I think the defense deserves it. Outside of playing USC, the number 1 offense in the country, according to SP+, Notre Dame has now held opponents to 13 points or less in 5 of the last 6 contests. Just a ridiculously positive turnaround. I think the success rate you talked about was the stat of the game that's worth double clicking on. Navy's offense is 22nd overall according to SP+. So opponent adjusted efficiency metrics, say play-by-play data, this is a top 25 offense. And another great test, albeit with the funky scheme, I get it. And you said it, Mike, they do that by staying on schedule. It's the whole point of the triple options. They are 5th in the country with a 53% success rate. Notre Dame, on the other hand, is 40% success rate allowed on defense. So if I'm looking at this game going in, Notre Dame does a good job if we hold them closer to 40, and Navy does a good job if they get closer to 53. But that's kind of the, that's kind of the bands. Like Notre Dame gives up around 40, they get around 53. Where's that going to meet in the middle? And in this game, holding them to a 32% success rate, significantly below their season average. One of the best numbers Notre Dame's put up all year in terms of keeping teams off schedule for an offense designed to stay on schedule. Super impressive. And look, this game was 7-7 into the second quarter, and then we kind of pulled away. I think that was more game flow. Like, we scored a touchdown on our first drive. We then had a 3-and-out on our second drive. And after that, the offensive scored touchdowns the rest of the game. And I think it just so happened that Navy scored their only touchdown after our 3-and-out to let them tie the game. And then it's Navy. So every drive takes forever, slows it down. You look up, you're like, oh my gosh, we're in the second quarter and it's a tie game. It never felt that way. And this is where the stats don't lie. In the first quarter, we beat them in success rate with Notre Dame 50% on offense, Navy 38% on defense. In the second quarter, we beat them 56% on offense to Navy's 39% on their offense. Like, we won the play-by-play who's staying on schedule in both quarters. Just funky game flow, 1-3-and-out goes against us. But it wasn't like I felt like our defense was getting beat or had to go make a bunch of adjustments or we're out of position or we're like, game flow, they got one touchdown. All right, like, tip your hat, go play the rest of the game. But they were not doing anything offensively that remotely came close to sustaining an offense start to finish. Like, even on their touchdown drive, they had multiple 0, 1, and 2 yard plays and then just kind of strung out a pretty long drive to go score. And like that's going to happen. That's just not sustainable. And it felt like our defense did every single thing to bottle up this Navy offense that coming into this game, even without their starting quarterback, which the triple option doesn't totally rely on an air raid, I felt like our defense balled out in this game and shut down the midshipmen.
Absolutely. And this is, I think for Notre Dame defenses, this game is very much I don't want to call it a check the box, but honestly, it kind of is. It's like if you have what you think is a really good defense, one test that you have to be able to pass is you have to be able to figure out the Navy triple option. And I would say all the great defenses or even just very good defenses that we've had, over the last 15 years or so, they've all checked that box. And then when we've had years where the defense has been a bit more suspect, not surprising, those teams tend to struggle a little bit more with the triple option. As we were talking about last week, what it comes down to is, so yes, Notre Dame has a big athletic advantage, skill advantage, strength advantage. But when you defend the triple option, a lot of it is discipline. It's maintaining assignments. It's knowing, keeping your eyes on where the ball is, and being able to effectively shut that down. That shows that you have a team that is playing in a disciplined manner. They're playing in a way to where they know their assignments and there's cohesion within the team. And that's something that we didn't have earlier in the year. So the fact that they were able to kind of come together and totally shut down this triple option tells you that a lot of these issues that we had, it seems like we've been able to iron it out. I'm going to call out a couple key players here who really helped push this defense to play at a very high level. This is one of those games where there are so many people that you could call out, but I'm going to highlight a couple here. So Jaden Osbury graded out exceptionally well, about an 85 Pro Football Focus grade. So that's an elite grade. He had 3 pressures, so he was getting after the quarterback, and he had a sack. And then an important stat that I feel like we haven't actually talked about a ton on the show, but something that Pro Football Focus tracks is the stat called a stop. And so basically, it is a play where the defensive player does something that constitutes a failure for the opposing offense. So it's not necessarily a tackle for a loss or a sack. It could even be, you make a big time play that causes them to only have a 1 or 2 yard gain. Well, so Osbury had 5 of these. So he was just very impactful from that standpoint. When he's just flying around the field, he was pressuring the quarterback. He was just not allowing much, to the opposing offense. And then KVA, I'll call out him as well. He had another stellar game, actually graded out higher than Osbury. Continues to trend up. This is I think the second week in a row that he was in one of our highest graded players on Pro Football Focus. So stellar performances from these two guys. They were great performances all around. These two guys in particular were, they were 2 guys who really stood out to me though.
Great call up. That's actually, I just pulled up KVA's game log. That is 3 games in a row where he's at a Pro Football Focus grade of 80 or higher. Second in a row above 85. So he's definitely balling out. Yeah, felt like a team effort. Linebackers in general. I mean, Drake Bowen made a ton of great plays. The tackling rate in general, again, less than 10% here, or right around 10%. Feels like we've been saying that a lot over the last 3-4 weeks. As Notre Dame's just gotten really fundamentally sound on that side of the ball. Last thing I'll call out on defense, we called this going into the game before we knew Blake Horvath was going out. And I think this might be more related to QB injury, but NBC broadcast called out what we did in the preview show. This was a Navy offense coming into this game with their most passing yards by Navy since 1994 in terms of their passing yards per game. And in this one, just never really got it going. Just 22 yards through the air, 2.2 yards per attempt, just not really an effective part of the game. And I thought that lack of balance for Navy is really what sank the ship. Okay, that's my second bad joke of the day. Moving on to the offense, I mean, anywhere you look here, right? A 54% success rate, phenomenal. Really didn't get disrupted at all. Navy had just an 8% havoc rate. And then, I mean, again, other than 1 3 and out and a QB kneel to end the first half, we scored on every single drive, a touchdown until the very final drive of the game where we milked the clock and took off 6.5 minutes to close this out. I thought the explosiveness, once again, it's what's differentiating us versus prior versions here of Notre Dame. KK Smith with a big time catch, Jeremiah Love, Jack Larson, Malachi Fields, and Will Pauling, 5 different players with a catch of 20-plus yards. You had Jeremiah Love going for a 48-yard touchdown. You had Anais Williams getting involved in garbage time with a 54-yard touchdown. Like, it was just big hit after big hit after big hit. And I think one of the things we're not maybe spending enough time talking about, when we're airing it out, when CJ Carr is going for 14 yards per attempt, and that, depth of target is also getting up there. In this game, his average depth of target was 13.5 yards. We're getting a lot more defensive pass interference penalties this year. All of those aggravating penalties where a guy's out of position and pulls him down, or it's an underthrown ball and, defender doesn't get turned around. We're now the beneficiary of that because Mike Denbrock's opening up the offense, because this isn't just exclusively a kind of muck it up ball control offense. Like, we've moved into the 21st century here, 25 years into the century, and obviously still a great run attack. We still have Jeremiah Love, who's going to probably be a Heisman Trophy finalist, or at least in the conversation to get his name called to go to New York. But opening up the offense is getting us so much more explosiveness. It's getting us PI calls that don't show up in the box score. We're just firing on all cylinders, and you can pick an advanced stat anywhere you look in this game. So many contributors, so many guys getting involved. My only concern is it felt like some of our big plays, like CJ Carr's under pressure and chucked it up, and I think we got away with it because it was Navy's defense. I get a little nervous that doing exactly what we did against Navy may not put up 49 points and, might have been a little reckless at times. But again, when you're up like 28-10, fine, grip it, rip it, go play. So I'm nitpicking there. I do, though, still question, like, we haven't seen a Texas A&M defense. We haven't seen a Miami defense here in a while. Really, our next best test the rest of the way is going to be next week at Pittsburgh. And I don't think we've seen a defense as good as Pittsburgh since week 2. Now, we put up a lot of points in week 2, but I get a little cautious looking at the data from this game and got to remind ourselves Navy's defense is pretty darn undermanned from a talent perspective.
Right. Well, we talked about that coming into this game. Navy typically does not have stellar defenses, and this is, I would say, a worse version than what they usually have. They were in the 80s, I believe, from an SP Plus standpoint. So not as bad as BC's defense coming into that game on paper, at least, but still, like, definitely one of, as far as defenses across college football, certainly I would say well below average. And look, of course, we checked the box, as you said, Brett. We checked the box. We did what we were supposed to. CJ Carr put up some phenomenal numbers, which you mentioned, the nearly 14 yards per attempt, the average depth of target of 13.5, with a 81% completion percentage, 87.5 adjusted completion percentage. Like, that's an impressive number. Look, no matter who you're playing, quite honestly, graded out really well, 87. But look, these Pro Football Focus grades are not opponent adjusted. So I think these points that you're making, it's about, like, how well is this going to carry to an elite defense? Look, I think Carr has, I think he has continued to develop. He's continued to improve. But he had a couple, he took a couple lumps, a few weeks ago. USC is one that comes to mind. It seems like he's trending the right way, but I think we want to see him, perform well against a great defense to kind of make sure that it's, like, fully clicked and he can do this at the highest level. And I think he can. It's just something that we're gonna need to see. I think Malachi Fields, this was a perfect game for him, right? Because his whole thing is he's a big bodied receiver who can grab 50-50 balls, and what better secondary to do that than the Navy, where you just have such a physical advantage. And that's kind of what you're getting at, Brett. We just kind of were able to just chuck it up to him, and look, he had like nearly 90 something. He had almost 100 yards going into the second half. Like, that's impressive, but I don't know that he's going to be able to do that if you're playing, Alabama, right? It's not going to be quite that easy. But still, look, we put up nearly 50 points. We had over 500 yards. Like, everyone was just like, there's plenty to go around. Like, CJ Carr put up phenomenal numbers. Jeremiah Love, look, he didn't have 200 yards, but he had nearly 100 yards rushing, plus, plus another
On just
27,
13 carries. I
13
think only
carries.
13 carries. So
Yeah,
again, pretty clear garbage time. We got him out
exactly.
of the game.
Which is good.
Ton of productivity on a limited number of touchdowns. The
Exactly.
touches. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he had that crazy 48-yard touchdown. It reminded me of that touchdown run from I think it was Oregon Auburn in the national championship. Maybe I don't know, it was 13 years ago, and very very similar. It looked like the player's knee would have gone down, but it didn't. He kind of rolled over the defender. But that one was a little different because then there was a little bit of acting that went on afterwards. He started kind of walking around, acting like he thought the play was dead. The whistle had never been blown dead, and then he ran for the touchdown. Or I think he ran for a touchdown or big gain.
My in-law text there, a bunch of Packer fans started talking about he did what Al Michaels call on the Antonio Freeman catch, where that was less about was Freeman down or not. It was more the ball bounced around 4 or 5 times and the improbable bobble on November 6th, 2000, Antonio Freeman winning it in overtime against the Vikings. But same thing where it's is he down? Did he catch it? Is he what's happening? And I get this was a run, so it's a little different. But yeah, just a crazy, crazy athletic play to stay balanced through that for sure.
He does. I feel like it's really been, he has had one play like that pretty much, every week for the last few weeks. And the Heisman Trophy it's as much narrative as it is actual production. And I think when you keep putting together highlight reel plays like this, it just makes you more and more of a legitimate contender for that trophy. And I have no idea who's going to win the Heisman Trophy. It seems like it's a little so far, it seems like it's a little bit more open than maybe it has been in some prior years. But as I would say, as you tend to get into that stretch run of the season, usually there is someone who eventually separates themselves. And there's some big time quarterbacks who are in the mix, and it wouldn't be surprising to see one of them take over. But if Love can even just get, if he can even just get to the ceremony as a finalist, that's a big win for running back. Now, Brett, I don't know if you don't have any more thoughts on the offense. There was one other point that I wanted to. Well, I think one big call out here is this was a very clean game for Notre Dame. No penalties and no turnovers. And look, I don't know who the officiating crew was. I don't know.
Is the American Conference, because it's Navy. Yeah. So the ACC refs took an off week.
Yeah. So look, we didn't have any penalties. Maybe it was because we didn't have the ACC refs. If you're wearing your tinfoil hat, I don't even know if it's even a tinfoil hat at this point, honestly.
I think ACC fans can't stand ACC refs.
Yeah. Well, look, and it goes both ways. It's not even just I feel like any game where it seems like there's been these just frankly bad calls against Notre Dame. There have been a lot of bad calls against our opposition as well. It's just kind of bad officiating all around. I would say this game I didn't really notice the officiating, which is usually the sign of a game that has been well officiated. But no penalties, no turnovers. I think a criticism that we've mentioned, we haven't dwelled on it too much, but we've mentioned it a bit, is that there have been some games where we've had some penalties, we've made some stupid mistakes, we haven't had the cleanest game, and we've left points on the board. Well, I would say this game was about as clean as it gets. And then even from an extra point standpoint, we made all our extra points. We didn't have any field goals. It would have been nice to maybe see that we could kick a field goal, but finally converting on all the extra points, that was good to see as well. So kind of as we said, coming into the show, this was a very simple game to analyze because we pretty much checked every box that I could think of.
Absolutely. Let's move to the college football playoff picture. Mike, we continue to view this as Notre Dame wins out and almost certainly we're in. Now, there's still some split models there. ESPN's model still says if Notre Dame wins out, we only got a 70% chance or so of getting in. Most of the other models say if Notre Dame wins out, we're for sure in. I want to spend a second on what it would take from here for Notre Dame to, win out and not get in. But before I do that, that's forward looking. Backward looking, I thought the ACC chaos was the most favorable thing of the weekend. I'm curious, Mike, as you look at the teams behind us in the rankings, who do you think, dropped in the rankings this week that I think, especially in that ACC, situation, help Notre Dame the most, knowing we maybe only moved up one spot, but I think what really happened this week was got some cushion behind us.
Yeah, well, look, so the spot that we're going to jump is I'll just start with that. So BYU lost to Texas Tech, and we were going to jump one of those teams. They played each other. So BYU, they at this point, their best win is Utah. Other than that, not which is a good win, by the way, but other than that, not a particularly tough schedule. Notre Dame has a clear edge in advanced stats over them, and I think that what the committee has tended to do is I don't know if you like exactly how to frame it, but maybe a bonus is kind of the right way to think about it. But if you're undefeated, it seems like the committee will give you a little bit extra credit for that. And I think BYU is getting that. And now that that's gone, I would be very surprised if Notre Dame doesn't jump them. So we should jump up one spot. I think the chaos you're talking about in the ACC. Look, I think Louisville dropped a game. That's a team that I think is as you have more of these ACC teams pile up losses, you avoid the scenario where they can get multiple teams into the playoff. So I think it's just as you see more and more of these ranked ACC teams lose and they keep getting kind of pushed further and further back, it's less likely that you could have a hypothetical ACC championship with one team that's in no matter what, win or lose, and then another team that could end up winning in a scenario where they wouldn't have got in otherwise. And that would be the situation that's not favorable to Notre Dame. And it seems, I would say increasingly so that doesn't seem as likely. It seems like it's probably going to be one team from the ACC. And as you mentioned, Brett, it's just, more and more cushion. I think the prior week, Georgia Tech dropping a game, that was also very favorable to us. At this point, I think it's favorable that Miami kind of stays further back in the top 25. Obviously from a quality of loss standpoint for Notre Dame, you kind of get a little bit of back and forth there. But I think at this point, it's certainly favorable for Miami to not slip into a guaranteed playoff position. And it doesn't seem like they will. It seems like they've kind of played themselves out of playoff contention. But I think that's kind of what you need to hope for. And it seems like that's becoming increasingly likely. And that's the type of chaos that we'd also like to see from, the Big 12, for instance.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the ACC now, Georgia Tech is the only one-loss team left. They still have Georgia on their schedule. So very likely the ACC championship game will be played between two-loss teams. What that means is, okay, more likely than not, the ACC will get a bid. Although there are some projection models that lay out scenarios, not likely, but where the ACC keeps imploding and actually the American and Conference USA could have higher ranked conference champions in say a James Madison or a South Florida. And actually the ACC could be shut out altogether. I think that's unlikely, but it's reaching a point where the ACC champion's probably 2 losses and everyone else is probably 3. That means you're going to be a one-team conference. I then start looking, okay, what are the scenarios where Notre Dame can be jumped? Because there's 2 things Notre Dame fans could cheer for. We're number 9. Most likely this week. So you could cheer, hey, can we move up one spot and then host a game? Or do we just try to preserve making sure we're for sure in? I would actually go for preservation. One of the concerns with a team above us losing is that it could imply someone else jumps us. And I think those scenarios, again, are pretty unlikely. The Athletic thinks it's 99% likely that if Notre Dame wins out, we're in. But again, ESPN says if we win out, there's still a 70% chance we make it. That means 30% we don't. So what could happen? A few things. Texas has Texas A&M and Georgia left. Let's say they win both of those games, or even one. Let's say they win just one of those games. Let's say they beat Texas A&M, who Notre Dame lost to, and they then have victories over A&M and Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. 3 top 25 wins that Notre Dame won't be able to match. And yes, they'll have 3 losses. Yes, one of those are to Florida, but the other 2 is a 1-score game to Ohio State on the road. And the other would be, in this case, I'm saying Georgia on the road. I think that 3-loss resume might be better than us. Similarly, Oklahoma right now has 2 losses. The committee has Notre Dame in front, but they have wins over Michigan, a close loss to Ole Miss, a win on the road over Tennessee. Yeah, they got blown out by Texas. Like, all right, like not the best when you're getting blown out. But if they go out and beat Alabama, Missouri, and LSU to end the year, I think Oklahoma probably jumps us. And I think if Alabama picks up a second loss, you still have Alabama with quality wins over Georgia on the road, Vanderbilt, Missouri on the road, and Tennessee. That's more quality losses than us. So the scenario where Oklahoma beats Bama and Texas plays really close in one game against Georgia and A&M and beats the other, I think sets up scenarios where we could get jumped, but we don't necessarily move up above the team that loses. And then the final scenario that I think you would need to believe happen is Texas Tech and BYU both run the table from here. Now, I'll call out that BYU here still has a pretty darn tough slate. They really haven't played anyone yet, but they've got TCU and at Cincinnati coming up to decently quality 6-3, 7-2 squads in the Big 12. We'll see if they can win both of those games. But if BYU gets back into the Big 12 title game against Texas Tech and beat Texas Tech, the committee has shown they usually won't punish someone for a conference championship loss, so they wouldn't punish Texas Tech, but BYU would have to get in as a conference champion, and so it's another team that could jump Notre Dame for an automatic qualifying spot. So if everything perfectly played out against Notre Dame, I could see a scenario where we wind up getting jumped by the likes of Oklahoma, Texas, BYU. That would move us back from the 9 spot to the 12, and then you still have one more automatic qualifier, maybe actually 2, between some combination of the ACC, the American Conference USA. Notre Dame could actually wind up falling all the way back to 14 in terms of seeding, maybe not the ranking, but seeding. And so I think Notre Dame is actually set up where we want to be cheering for those heavyweights to take advantage of the bigger games. We want to see Texas, Oklahoma, and BYU lose more so than we want to see the teams above us win. Now, if Oregon loses to USC, awesome. If Texas Tech or Ole Miss or Georgia stumble in a game they shouldn't, awesome. But I think generally Notre Dame is actually better served to see some continuity above us with favorites winning and prevent that tough discussion. I don't want to be in a tough discussion of Notre Dame's 2-loss resume against Alabama, Georgia, Texas Tech, and their 2-loss, or Oklahoma, like their 2-loss. I don't want to be in that discussion as the season goes on. Would rather see the teams behind us here stumble down the stretch.
Yeah, agree. It's look, I think it's, just to use a gambling analogy, basically there has to be a multiple leg parlay that has to go against Notre Dame for us to not make it. Assuming we win out. Obviously, if we lose, then all this doesn't even matter. I think, and look, one aspect that I think is somewhat helpful for Notre Dame is that I think Pitt will be seen, assuming that if we're able to go on the road and win against what is a good Pitt football team, that will be a quality win. They would get knocked out of the top 25, but I think the committee would see that as a strong win. So that's something that would help us a little bit. I think USC is looking like they're good this year. Like if you look at the advanced stats, looks like they're number 12 in SP plus. So that's a win that should continue to look favorable for us. Now, as you hinted at, Brett, if they're able to knock off Oregon, then look, that just helps build more cushion in these scenarios where there's a question of if one of these games doesn't go our way, like say Oklahoma beats Alabama, right, or something like that, right? Or beats. Who do they play? Oklahoma plays Georgia.
Oklahoma plays Alabama. Yeah,
Alabama.
Oklahoma plays Alabama coming up.
That's right.
I think in 2 weeks, the 15th. Yeah.
Okay,
so literally this next weekend. Yeah,
that's right.
Weekend.
That's right. Yeah. So look, it's
roll tide.
Just, yeah, exactly. So these things like help us in these scenarios. It makes it maybe a little less likely if a couple of these things don't go our way that maybe we've built enough cushion. But it's something that we don't want to see that. We don't want to see this being tested. We want these teams to take care of business, and where the top teams don't take care of business, we want it to be more of just a big upset, right? Like we almost saw this past weekend with Oregon almost going down, like we almost saw with IU almost going down. Didn't happen, but look, any given week, there are enough scenarios where I would imagine one of these teams is probably going to get tripped up at some point. So we'll see. But look, we're in a great spot. I think, like, realistically, we're in a more of a question of not are we in, but are we hosting a home playoff game? It seems like that's kind of the more likely question to be asking here. Not that we're, like Brett, as you mentioned, not that there's no scenario where we get kicked, like pushed out even if we went out. Like, it's possible, but it seems unlikely. But it seems like the bigger question here is, like, what are the things that need to happen for us to host another game in South Bend?
Absolutely. Let's move to the college football coaching carousel. Crazy that back in September we were talking about Sam Pittman being let go. There are currently 9 Power 4 programs with a coaching vacancy. Now, one of these, I don't know, Stanford, that happened in the offseason, and they're just rolling the dice with an interim here for the full year. So I'll say 8. I'm going to disregard that one. But you have UCLA, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, Oklahoma State fires Mike Gundy, Auburn Tigers fire Hugh Freeze. And then, of course, the big names at the top, Florida, Penn State, and LSU. Mike, I have been the longtime Brian Kelly apologist, and by no means was he getting the job done at LSU. But I'm probably the last Notre Dame fan that gets to sound off on Brian Kelly in a negative way. What are your thoughts on the Brian Kelly situation at LSU? I know we're a couple of weeks past. We'll get into the rest of the carousel, but I think we have to start there.
Look, I think about Brian Kelly very similarly to you. So if I just take what he did at Notre Dame in a vacuum, if I ignore the way that he left, which obviously you can't totally ignore, but I'm going to ignore that for now. If I look at what he actually did, he left Notre Dame in a much better place when he left than when he came in. Notre Dame, when he came in, this was a program that was just mired in years of true mediocrity. There was just the question of actually competing for a national title wasn't even something that felt feasible, right? There would maybe be a good year here or there where we'd go on a nice win streak, but then we'd eventually get exposed by someone. So Kelly, he certainly elevated, particularly post 2016. He elevated the consistency of the program to where we were consistently one of those top programs. We were consistently a top 10 program, I would say, which is much better than where we had been. Now, look, there was a massive, massive gap between a top 10 program and then a top 2 or top 3 program. And we would see that when we would get to the college football playoff, and then we'd play teams like Alabama, or Clemson when they were, when Clemson was kind of at the peak of their powers with that generational run at quarterback that they had. So Kelly was able to kind of build a very strong foundation, which is something that I don't think we can totally ignore. And if Notre Dame goes on to win a national title at some point in the next couple years, look, I think Kelly obviously would deserve, there's a certain amount of credit that he would deserve for just kind of getting the program in a position where they could even elevate someone like Marcus Freeman. So that's how I wanted to start. Now, now that I've kind of given the positive of Brian Kelly's tenure at Notre Dame, I have to talk about how he left, and how he left was obviously that's how he's kind of left everywhere. He did this exact same thing to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati fans were like, yeah, hey, look, he's a great coach, but he's really just looking out for number one. And, it didn't seem like he really was ever totally bought into the program. He was just kind of like looking ahead. And I think at Notre Dame, we thought, because we're Notre Dame, that surely it would be different. And you have this guy who's, Irish Catholic from Massachusetts. Like, surely this is the type of guy who's just going to be totally bought in on the university. And look, I think he understood Notre Dame. I think he had a good grasp of it, but I don't think he necessarily like loved it and embraced it the same way that we've seen Marcus Freeman love and embrace it. And, I think that became apparent when he left. And when he left, he said it was basically, the short of it was, he's like, I'm going to LSU because I think it's a place where they take football a little bit more seriously, and I'm going to be able to actually win a national title there. So very much an indictment on Notre Dame's status and ability to actually compete at the highest level. And since he left, it really could not have gone any better. Marcus Freeman has elevated the level of the program to an extent that I to be honest, definitely didn't even think was possible when he took over the job back then. It's to the point to where a national title feels within reach. It doesn't feel like a crazy aspiration anymore. Certainly there's teams like Ohio State who I think are a little bit of a cut above, but it doesn't, if Notre Dame won a national title this year, that wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me. I'd be like, okay, yeah, we had some things go our way, but this is a team that seems like they could compete against the top teams. And on any given day, you could knock off another team that, even if they're a little bit better than you, you're still close enough to where you could actually, you could beat them. So, I think it's remarkable from that standpoint where Notre Dame's gotten, just kind of a what a great counterpoint to the way that Coach Kelly left. And then since Kelly went to LSU, I mean, really an awkward fit. I think Brian Kelly is a very good coach. I think if you give him enough time, I think he's eventually going to get the program to where it needs to be. I felt that at LSU, even if it was a little bit of an awkward cultural fit. And I think maybe he wasn't, embracing certain elements of the LSU culture or certain nuances of that program the way that he should. Because that's a program that you could, if you get everything aligned properly, you can. I mean, that program can be like rocket fuel, right? It can be just like a jet to a national, it can be just like a rocket ship to a national title. We've seen coaches who I still believe are worse coaches than Brian Kelly win national titles there. I don't think anyone's going to say that Les Miles or Orgeron are all-time great coaches.
Nick Saban guy, though.
Nick Saban guy he's pretty good. But the thing with Nick Saban is he was the guy who kind of provided the modern blueprint for how you can win the national title. And it doesn't seem like Kelly really took any cues from that. So, and that's been Kelly's MO, I think, throughout his career. It's kind of my way or the highway. This is the only way I know how to do things. I would say from 2016 onward at Notre Dame, he kind of actually softened on that stance a little bit. And not surprisingly, Notre Dame performed a lot better, but it seemed like he was kind of back to that stubborn, it's like, I'm the only one who knows like the right thing to do. It seemed like that was the Kelly that we saw at LSU, and it didn't really click with LSU. So,
Brian Kelly 1.0 showed up in Baton Rouge, not Brian Kelly 2.0. Like pre-Van Gorder showed up, not post-Van Gorder.
Yeah,
my other thoughts too on the LSU thing is now stepping back to the carousel of the 8 or 9 open jobs here. I got a hot take. I don't view LSU as one of those top 5-10 jobs in the country. And everyone does. Like every other list has them in like a top 5 job. And let's be clear, they hired away Notre Dame's coach. And so I'll acknowledge they will pay a top 5 number. I still maintain Brian Kelly was offered a 10-year, $93 million deal until his age 73, 74, trip around the sun. Yeah, if someone wants to offer me a 10-year, $93 million deal, guess what? I will accept. I will take that job. I will throw loyalty out the wind. You've bought me. I'll do it all in, guaranteed money. And that's playing out for Kelly right now. I don't know if he wants to coach or not, but he's in his mid-60s and is getting this $50-some million buyout. Like, great day to be a Kelly. And other than the money, I feel like LSU is a little bit of like a New York sports town. Like you can go win 10 games, you can go win a national title, and it's not good enough. We'll fire you 2 years later. Like Les Miles, Ed Orgeron. They also, I don't think, have the same history everyone wants to talk about. They didn't win a title from 1958 until Nick Saban showed up. And Les Miles felt more lucky than real. I don't think that LSU team is like winning a title in a college football playoff format. Ed Orgeron got lightning in a bottle with a Joe Burrow transfer and just assembling like the greatest offense of all time and felt super unsustainable. Like LSU, other than Nick Saban, who then wanted to leave, LSU hasn't had like a sustained platform of success like ever, like back to the 50s. And so, look, what can Notre Dame say, right? Like we haven't won our title since 88, but I think in the last 15 years, we've proven you can show up to Notre Dame and you can expect to win 10 plus games a year and just be competitive in a way LSU hasn't. And that gets me to my next point. What are these programs doing with these buyouts? I understand it's privately funded. I understand the boosters are showing up with the money, but these boosters aren't unlimited pockets. I think everyone just hears, oh, go ask the boosters and you'll get the money. Like, yeah, but they aren't unlimited. Like inherently, if someone shows up with a $50 million check this year, it's going to be a little less next year, the year after that, the year after that. Like at some point, it's going to be a little less. At some point, it's going to come out of your NIL. At some point, it's going to come out of your facilities. At some point, it's going to come out of the conversation when you want to go and hire the best in class offensive and defensive coordinator. It's going to come out of your assistants' budgets. Versus you're really telling me that things got so bad that you were literally one like pass rush interception away from playing in the national championship game, Penn State, that you are firing him? Now, maybe there's a lesson in there. James Franklin shouldn't little brother speech Notre Dame and our independence right in front of Marcus. Sure seems like his career has taken a, wrong turn since he tried to, pat Marcus on the head and say, hey, nice job, little guy, but you're not in the big leagues. How's that working out? But what are they doing? Like, they were competitive in those games. They weren't getting blown out. UCLA is weird. I get it, but they were competitive against Oregon. They were competitive against IU. They're kind of going through, Penn State is going through their 2016 Notre Dame season, where clearly the advanced metrics are saying this is a top 20 program, and they're just not getting the W's on the field. Football's a weird sport. But you fire the guy and you mortgage your next 5 years of budgeting? Like, the next guy's not going to be successful because you don't have the resources now. I just don't understand the math behind these buyout deals for guys that are winning. Billy Napier, I kind of get more than the others. That's just been like a train wreck from the start. But like Brian Kelly coached a Heisman Trophy winner 2 years ago. James Franklin was one play away from a national championship game last year. I don't understand the impatience and how they think that's going to be long-term smart.
Looking at Notre Dame as an example, right? The 2016 season, not that far removed from that magical national title, run season. Look, that was a terrible season, and there were a lot of Notre Dame fans who were calling for Brian Kelly's head at that point. But Notre Dame, we kept our wits about us. Our administration didn't panic, and we took a holistic view of the program. We didn't jump the gun. And the conclusion that we came to was, okay, yeah, we need to change some things. We need a revamp of the program. We've had extensive conversations with Brian Kelly, and we have a game plan to change these things that failed us this season. And who knows the program better than Brian Kelly, the guy who's running it, and he's willing to make these changes. Seems like the best person for the job. We did that. We stuck with them, and then it could not have gone any better. So whenever I'm with you, whenever I see these reactions where I feel like coaches are maybe being fired a little bit too early, especially when the buyouts are this big, especially when the money at stake is that significant. I can't help but think that that there are scenarios where maybe if you held on a little bit longer, you let the coach kind of continue to build his program and make some adjustments. Like maybe you aren't as far from the fruits of all that labor up to that point, right? You could look at Osborne at Nebraska, right? That's an older reference, but it took him a long time to build that Nebraska program into the behemoth that it became in the 90s. So there's just not the same level of patience. I mean, patience. I mean, I think some of this could be like for better or for worse. Yeah. Now look, these boosters are becoming more and more essential to college football, right? It's like they're funding so much of what goes into the success of that team. And these are not always the most patient people, right? So if they're putting in, if you're cutting a $20 million check for one season, and then you lose 5 games in the first 8 games of the season, look, not only is the season not going your way, but you also personally probably feel like you kind of got duped. And so I think sometimes that maybe that is kind of bubbling up and it's causing these boosters to put more pressure to make these changes. So look, I think this is certainly, I think there's too much of this happening to where we can't say that this is not a trend. This is currently obviously becoming like a new status quo across college football.
Absolutely. And I got 2 other themes that I wanted to hit on because I think it's important for Notre Dame in this too. One is the holistic budget of a program. I mentioned that from the buyout perspective. I think one of the other really interesting scenarios right now is Virginia Tech basically has come out and said, we've completely underfunded the football program to be competitive. And they fired Brent Pry, but they've now publicly said, we're going to catch up and invest going forward in things like NIL and transfer portal and facilities and everything else. Honestly, if I'm a coaching candidate, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'll go there once you do that. Like, that just feels like a sales pitch right now to get a coach saying, hey, we're ready to invest. I don't know. Like, I've heard similar things about, I think Arkansas clearly wants to, willing and able, but like just haven't put it together with Sam Pittman and like the guys they're bringing in the portal. I remember covering that game. It's like, really? Like, you had to go to Montana State to get your starting safety? Like, you couldn't pony up? Like, you can't outspend Texas Tech for the same position group.
Oil money, Brett. It's oil money.
There's some oil fields in Arkansas too, but
Walmart.
And so I just think these universities here, I think, need to get a little more realistic that it's not just the coach right now. Like, you need the holistic support. Notre Dame's learned that lesson. Like, Brian Kelly pushed back on it. And as much as Notre Dame fans want to say he didn't go about it the right way or he used it as an excuse, honestly, it's really helping Marcus Freeman. Like, Kelly leaving opened up Notre Dame to say, okay, we got to give the next guy what they ask for and then hope the results show up. And they have. And it can't be like, prove it and then we'll give it to you. Like, that's not that chicken and the egg doesn't work in the portal and NIL era. The other thing that I thought was interesting was looking at where last year's college football playoff coaches came from. Very, very few were in their second stint as a Power 4 coach. So what do I mean by that? Dan Lanning was a defensive coordinator at Georgia. Go to the number 2 seed, Georgia. Kirby Smart was a defensive coordinator at Alabama. Georgia's his first stop. Now, I get it. He's been there a while. 3 seed, Boise State. Spencer Danielson was an internal promotion from defensive coordinator. Number 4, Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham, offensive coordinator at Oregon. Previous Arizona State assistant, kind of an internal hire. Steve Sarkisian. Okay, that's our first coach with a previous head coaching experience at the Power 4 level. By the way, not super successful before coming into Texas. Penn State, that's our second. James Franklin was at Vanderbilt. 7, Notre Dame, internal promotion. Number 8, Ohio State, Ryan Day, internal promotion. Tennessee, I didn't look this one up. Heupel, UCF.
I think
so.
Yeah,
but I think it was before they were in the Big 12. So group of 5, I'm going to say that one doesn't really count. Kurt Cignetti was at JMU before they were in Power 5, or before they were even group of 5. So that doesn't really count. And then you got Dabo was the 12 seed. And then SMU's coach, I believe, was also a first-time head coach. Where I go with that is, where should these programs start looking? And everyone wants to say, well, if you get rid of James Franklin, you better have the next Nick Saban in mind. That's not really true. That's not where the best coaches have come from. One of the things that stand out is how many of those were kind of internal promotions, like Notre Dame, or like a Boise State, or like an Ohio State, that kind of shows program continuity with the internal promotion when the last guy leaves. But the other is actually going out and getting a lot of rising stars in their late 30s, early 40s, a la Kirby Smart, a la Dan Lanning, a la Kenny Dillingham. I keep thinking the way the game is moving with NIL and transfers and like real-time player development relationship, like, I don't think the way to go win tomorrow is necessarily to go get the prove it, been there, done that, 56-year-old gray hair guy. I think it's the up and coming coordinators, group of 5 coaches that can get that groundswell of support like a Marcus Freeman. Where do I go with that? I don't think I'd hire James Franklin. Maybe James Franklin is the exception. Like, I would probably go hire James Franklin. But I don't think I'd go and hire some of these has-beens that we're starting to see turn around. Like Mike Gundy said, I want to go coach. I think Brian Kelly's out there saying like he wants to coach again. I don't think that's where the sport's moving. I think the sport is moving towards these like late 30s, early 40 guys that are like, more connected to the players, more dynamic to NIL and transfer. And you're seeing that. I get it. One college football playoff. We'll see how it looks this year. But that feels like a growing trend of where you see these programs have success.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Brett. I feel like I should call out. I don't know for sure if this report is true, but I saw some articles out there that said that Urban Meyer, who is a very established head coach, but certainly I think has not been trending the right way for a while. He was linked to the Penn State job and interviewed, and they turned him down because they didn't like his answers on NIL and recruiting and relationships with players. So that would go with what you're saying, Brett. It's like he's not as in tune to what the current landscape is. Now, look, I'm not 100% sure that report is true. That also seems like something that
Penn State would say.
Yeah, it sounds like something on a message board. Someone says it on a message board and everyone thinks it's hilarious, so then it goes viral. Another thought I had, going back to Brian Kelly, is I love this scripted movie scenario where Brian Kelly, he's just like, his life's goal is to win Notre Dame a national title, and he just can't do it. So he has a meeting with God, and God says there's one way that you can get Notre Dame a national title, but you're going to have to publicly rebuke Notre Dame, and everyone's going to hate you, and you're going to go to LSU, and it's going to fail. He's like, but that's going to light a fire under Notre Dame's behind, and get everyone aligned behind this new guy, Marcus Freeman.
You can't possibly think that's what was going through Brian Kelly's mind, and it had nothing to do with the $93 million guaranteed to him.
What better story for a Catholic school than you have a martyr who, a
$93 million martyr. What a sacrifice.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's probably not what happened.
We're going to get so much hate mail over that take, Chernay. We got to redact that, Mike.
I'm not saying that I hope it. I just think it'd be funny if that happened. If it came out and he penned a letter the day, a week before he took the job or something. It's like stamped.
Sometimes stamped. Hey, secretly, this was for you.
I don't want to do it, but
all right, we are going into deep state, conspiracy theories here. So let's round this back together.
One last thought.
Go for it. Have you got the final thought? I'm out of thoughts. I've said all mine.
I'm jumping around. These are like three, stream of consciousness thoughts. And then the last
one. We have an analytics-based podcast, because when we let Mike start having stray thoughts, this is what we get. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Well, then, okay, just like on. Yeah, we were talking about funding and buyouts, right? And I think like these buyouts are prohibitively more expensive for some of these Southern schools, frankly, right? I think back in the old era of college football, where these payments were banned, but there would be stuff that would happen under the table, and certain schools were a bit more willing to do it than others. I think they were able to thrive a little bit more. But now that everything is, above ground, the schools that are just frankly better funded, I think that they're just much better positioned. And so, like this buyout amount, for LSU, look, I think it's quite significant. Whereas like if you like looked at a school like Notre Dame or even a school like Michigan, these are schools that they just frankly have more resources. They have an alum base that I think is easier to draw. It's not a limitless pool of money, but you could just look at the endowments, and I think that speaks for itself about how substantial the resources are. So I think that just
I would have actually taken the other side of that, and I would have said I think LSU has just a broader, deeper fan base as a large public institution, more alumni, an entire state behind it, etc.
Higher willingness to pay, maybe.
I think higher willingness to pay, maybe not necessarily more about resources. Or like again, you take the Texas schools that clearly are really well funded. It's interesting. Like I'm actually curious how that would play out. I got a feeling if you ask the SEC based schools, they would have a deeper reaction to that I feel like they would say, hey, I think we're actually more well resourced than say like an ACC school. But I'm curious because like clearly it feels like at least right now the Big Ten, and I'll add Notre Dame into that, like are more consistent, better continuity as you look at the likes of Oregon, Ohio State, even to their credit, as much as I cannot stand this and I hope they burn, Michigan, despite being in scandal, has continuity. Like Notre Dame has continuity. Indiana has somehow figured it out.
Right.
in a way that you just see way more kind of reactionary turmoil in the SEC. I wonder if that's actually a little bit more rabid fan base than it is resources,
Well,
but it's an
and I
interesting question.
and I think that's this. I think the distinction is the schools I'm kind of focusing on here are these like northern schools that have historically been strong football programs, as opposed to like Duke, right? Like if Duke decided, if like Duke was like, if the
But
Duke
Duke
fan base,
is, technically in the South.
yes, but they're different profile. But like I think it's
Yeah,
I think it's like a
I'm
school
with
like
you.
Duke or Stanford, right? If they just like woke up tomorrow and their alum base was like, actually, you know what? Yeah, we don't really care about like funding PhD programs anymore. We actually just care about winning a national title. Like I think that they would, they could turn that on quick. But but like to your point earlier, there's just not a willingness to do that, and there's no tradition. Whereas like schools like Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, right? These are schools with rich traditions, and then you couple that with the fact that they are very well funded institutions with big fan bases. And look, it's just like I think if Notre Dame had to pay a high buyout, I mean, obviously we've paid high. It's fine. The buyouts, I guess, we've paid in the past. Like they don't even like look that big anymore compared to what schools are paying now. But you look at the what you'd have to pony up for some of these big buyouts, and yeah, look, I just think it doesn't like stretch the budget maybe as much as it would for some of these other schools.
By the way, Charlie Weiss's buyout was 19 million, which even
Yeah.
today still seems like a big number, but pales in comparison to some of these big ones. So with
Ron
that,
Berger.
we will round out the show. We've got a Pittsburgh preview coming for you later this week. Until then, Irish beat Panthers.
Garish beat Panthers.